You've said totalitarian societies always exhaust themselves in the end. However, we've never seen totalitarianism on such a collective global scale and with this level of technocratic capability. How do you think this might affect the outcome, if at all?
Yes, indeed, it's a worldwide totalitarian system with a huge technological machinery to indoctrinate the population, to use propaganda and so on. That's true, but sometimes the more... First, the fact that it is a worldwide system means that the only way to resist the system is a non-violent way. That's something very important. When a totalitarian system has external enemies, these external enemies can destroy the totalitarian system through violence, through aggression. Resistance from within a totalitarian system can only be effective if it is non-violent in nature. So that's one difference. So that should make us very determined to choose the way of non-violent resistance. That's extremely important. And then the fact that the system has a huge technological machinery at its disposal shouldn't be a disadvantage, actually. The more means a totalitarian system has at its disposal, also the more self-destructive it can become. So totalitarian systems and mass formation, in the end, always become a monster, said Hannah Arendt, that devours its own children. They always become self-destructive. And the only thing we should try to find out is how we can make that the totalitarian system exhausts itself, destroys itself, before it destroys the people who resist it. So that's the entire question. And I think from a psychological analysis, you can clearly see what we have to do. The first and most important tactical and ethical principle we have to stay true to, we have to stick to, is always that we have to practice the art of good speech. You have to learn what it is to speak out in a good and effective way.
In history, there's been examples of orchestrated food shortages, such as the so-called Great Irish Famine, or Holodomor in the Ukraine in the 30s. If this happens, it would place the masses on the bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What effect, positive or negative, do you think existing on that level would have on the hypnotized as they place all of their energy into basic survival?
It probably won't wake them up. As always, chaos and famine and stuff like that initially will be used by those who identify with the new system to justify the introduction of the new system. And they will, like people who want to reshape society according to technocratic and transhumanist ideals or ideologies, will just use the chaos, use the famine, use everything to argue that if we don't change society, if we don't reshape society, we will never be capable, we will never be able to control the chaos, and things will get dramatic. So initially, the emerging new ideology, the emerging new technocratic system will use the chaos to its own advantage, but after a while, the chaos will get worse. It might even be that the chaos is created to a certain extent, of course. That's what certain people always prefer to do, to create chaos just because they know that the anxiety and so on can be weaponized and used to introduce the new system they want to introduce. So I think that will happen, and that's what is happening now at the moment. But at the same time, a real chaos will start to emerge because this system will fail to control everything. That's exactly the characteristic of, society and psychological processes in society are intrinsically a complex dynamical phenomenon. And complex dynamical phenomena can never be perfectly controlled, even not by the most impressive surveillance machinery you can imagine. So initially, the system will use the chaos to its own advantage, and after a while, it will fail to control it and collapse as a consequence of it. That's what I think.
Goebbels once allegedly said, if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. However, he also recognised the lie will only work so long as people are shielded from the economic consequences of the lie. We've seen this to be true in Sri Lanka. People have risen up there. The world has entered into a hyperinflationary state with a pending unprecedented global recession. What effect do you think this will have on waking people from their hypnotic state in relation to climate change and other agendas?
I don't think the effect will be very big. Because, you know, people, it might wake people up from their belief in certain narratives as the Corona narrative. Even that is not sure, I think. But they will go along with a new narrative. The narrative about how to deal with the economic crisis. And then it will be that narrative that is used to convince them that they need to, that we all need this reshaping of society according to the technocratic ideal. So I don't think it will really wake people up, no, the economic crisis.
In Sri Lanka, allegedly, people have, I mean, it's not seen in the mainstream media, but we hear reports of people in Sri Lanka laying waste to the residences of their political leaders. They seem to be rising up. Why do you think that is?
The same could happen here. Definitely, the same could happen here. And why is it? Just because people, when they are hungry, they want food. But the question is, I think, will it make them fundamentally object against this new technocratic ideology? That's the big question, I think. That's a big question. Or will, in the end, will they buy into a new narrative that is presented to them, that is disseminated through the mass media, telling them that the only solution for their hunger, for the famine, is to embrace this technocratic ideology even further? That's the big question, I think. We need more food printed in laboratories. We should stop the consumption of meat and so on. That will be the big question. Will the famine make them realize that this technocratic ideology is not a solution to the problem, but rather is the origin of the problem, is the cause of the problem, or will it just will the famine make them accept the ideological technocratic changes in society even further? I think that's a big question. There might be riots. There will probably be riots, but I doubt whether the majority of the people whether it will make the majority of the people see that the real cause of the problems is this technocratic ideology. I wouldn't be surprised if it was rather the other way around, that the people in the end will follow the technocratic ideology even more than they did before. So that's the big question, I think.
The ones in charge of unleashing these agendas and their catastrophic effects on humanity have a thin veneer of civility in order to gain compliance. Is it important they maintain the air of caring for our best interests, and how integral is it for them to perpetuate this strategy? In other words, if they let the mask slip, would it make those affected surrender more?
I believe that totalitarian leaders often believe themselves that they will save the world. I really believe so. They really believe that, at least that was what the fascist totalitarianism and communist totalitarianism really believed. They believed that they really needed to create this new artificial society according to their pseudo-scientific theory, historical materialism of Marx and the Soviet Union, or certain Darwinist race theories or neo-Darwinist race theories in Nazi Germany. These totalitarian leaders really were convinced that they would create a new society which would be a paradise for the human being. But as Hannah Arendt said, the only problem, and I mentioned that yesterday as well during my reading, the only problem with this totalitarian paradise is that this looks suspiciously a lot like hell. It's in the end, totalitarian leaders and their blind fanatic belief that they will create like a new artificial paradise for the human being, destroy all humanity. I really think that the totalitarian leaders now also believe that they will create this transhumanist, new society the human being, in the end, after a certain time, will live forever, that it will be put in a constant state of biochemically induced happiness, and so on and so on. I think these totalitarian leaders believe so, and of course they think that they will be the leaders of this new society, and that they will be the first ones who will live forever, and so on and so on. And they think that it might be justified to select to destroy a part of the population to create this new paradise, and so on and so on and so on. That's exactly the dramatic profile of totalitarian leaders, that they so fanatically believe that they create paradise that they think it is justified to cheat, manipulate, and in the end murder and eliminate everyone who doesn't want to go along to that to their utopian totalitarian paradise. So I think they do not only keep up appearances, I think they really have this delusional belief that they will create a new paradise for the human being. Yes. And that's, like Gustave Le Bon said, that is in the end what makes them so convincing to many people, because they believe in their own lies. Not, that depends. They don't believe the narratives they use. Very often they know that the narratives they use are pure propaganda and indoctrination, and that they just use them to manipulate the population in a certain direction. But they usually do believe in their ideology. At least the public totalitarian leaders do. There are always some people who never enter public space, but who maybe pull the strings a little bit from behind the screens. And whether these people also believe in the ideology, that's a different question.
These utopias would probably more likely end up as a kind of behavioural sink type scenario, I suppose, where people end up turning on each other because there's not enough resources, or in that utopian communism ideal, there's never enough resources for everybody. It perpetuates poverty and starvation.
Yes, it usually does, because it needs anxiety, it needs all kinds of anxiety to just to continue this process of mass formation, which is so fundamental for totalitarian systems. And a totalitarian system always needs an object of anxiety, or otherwise the process of mass formation would stop. It always needs an enemy. It always needs something to organize the masses around. So yes, I guess they will keep the population in a state of constant troubles and unhappiness. Yeah.
People who are enlightened have hope in the belief others will have a moment of lucidity that awakens them from the mass formation. For example, if a child was to die post-COVID injection, but this doesn't happen as often as we think, and it would appear the capacity for denial in humans is greater than their ability to face the truth. In this case, that they played a hand in their own child's death. Do you think the capacity for this level of self-protective denial has or will ultimately prove to be a destructive force on a collective scale?
Yes. I think that's one of the reasons why mass formation and totalitarianism is always self-destructive, because it denies a major part of reality, and you cannot deny a major part of reality without a backlash. It always, in one way or another, it always this denied part of reality always takes its revenge. It will in a certain way make that what you do doesn't add up, that your actions are inefficient, and so on and so on. But again, probably, the system is self-destructive and it will self-destroy. But of course, as I always try to tell time and time again, it might first destroy everyone who doesn't go along with the system. So what the people who defy the system, people who resist the system, should realize is that it will be dependent on the choices they make, the strategical and first and foremost the ethical choices, whether the system will destroy itself before it destroys the people who do not go along with it. So that's just quintessential. We have to understand the mechanisms at work. We have to understand the psychological mechanisms at work in the first place, And if we understand the mechanism in an accurate and an adequate way, then we will be capable of making the right choices, both at the strategical and at the ethical level.
We've seen with ideologies such as communism how much loss of life can result before a regime collapses. We presume humanity ultimately wins out, but mRNA technology aside, in your opinion, is it possible we'll see a huge death toll before this regime collapses?
I think it's definitely something dangerous. It's not my level of expertise to how dangerous the mRNA vaccines are, but I think it's in a strange way when there is a trend towards totalitarianization and when there is a mass formation, almost everything that is used and invented and so on turns out to be destructive. That's a very strange thing. If you read Solzhenitsyn, he also describes this in a very eloquent and very evocative way, how all the projects of totalitarian systems in the end turn out to be destructive and self-destructive. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone is in the grip, if someone's field of attention is narrowed down. Usually what they do has a destructive potential, has a self-destructive potential. So even when purely taking into account psychological mechanisms, you can expect that no matter what measures this system proposes, they will always, and to a certain way, be toxic and self-destructive.
Can I ask how this journey has affected you?
Yes, definitely. Well, from the beginning of the crisis, I don't know why, but I immediately decided to speak out, and which wasn't an easy thing. Many people tried to smear me, tried to destroy my reputation, and at the social media there was a lot of mud that was thrown at me. And throughout this process, the 2.5 years now that I have been speaking out, I just learned to react in a calm and quiet way, because I know and I feel that if I start to act upon my anger, that I sometimes do feel when people throw mud at me and smear me and so on, it will just be a flame that burns for my own destruction. I feel that I should always act in a quiet way and in as quiet and calm way as possible, which doesn't mean that my reaction is sometimes very determined and firm, but not. I know that I have to resist acting upon my own anger and my own aggression in such situations. And I feel that the longer I continue to speak out, and the more I practice the art of good, quiet, calm speech, the more I feel how a certain calm power becomes stronger and stronger and stronger in myself. And I think that's exactly what makes this entire process full of meaning. If we make the right choices, if we stick to certain ethical principles, if we continue to practice the art of good speech in this situation, we will go through a very fast process of evolution as a human being, while the masses will become weaker and weaker and weaker at the psychological level. And in the end, we always have to be aware of the fact that this in the first place is a psychological battle. And in the end, I really believe that no matter how small the group is that resists the masses, this small group will become more powerful at the psychological level, and it will be capable of delivering the new principles for a really true, fruitful human living together here on this planet.
We're setting up a new media platform in Ireland. One of the reasons the Nazi Party gained public support in the 30s was because the master of propaganda, Goebbels, recognised the power of media manipulation. Given the sheer power and corruption within the media, and presuming that many journalists themselves are part of the mass formation, how do we go about counteracting this persistent brainwashing of Irish people with our new media platform?
Yes, well, never fall prey to the illusion that you can convince people in a mass formation. You won't. Certain people might wake up one here and there, but usually that's something that Gustave Le Bon knew already very well in the 19th century. He said when there is a large-scale mass formation, certain people are resilient and don't fall prey to it, and these people typically try to speak out. They typically try to wake up the masses. They are just baffled, mind-boggled by what is happening around them, and usually they won't succeed in waking them up. But he said, and that's just crucial, we have to know that it's not because we don't succeed in waking up the masses that our speech has no effect. Our speech has an enormous effect. It constantly disturbs the mass formation. It constantly reminds the people in the masses that the people who do not go along with them are human beings. And what does a human being do in the first place? It speaks. Human beings use language. They articulate their opinion. So that's what we have to. We have to continue to testify of our own humanity through speech. That was what we have to do. Not so much trying to convince the other people, but just living up to just claiming our right to articulate our own opinion, to articulate the words that to us seem sincere and honest. And that's where we have the maximal effect. If we constantly try to convince the other people, we might make them angry, because most people who are in the mass formation want to stay in the mass formation, and we don't have to try too much to convince them. We just have to disturb the state of hypnosis, the state of mass formation, by articulating our own opinion and by speaking out. And in that way, we will make sure that the mass formation doesn't go to the last and ultimate stage, which is the stage in which the masses start to become completely convinced that they have to destroy everyone who doesn't go along with them. That's the only thing you have to do. You have to practice the art of good speech, and without trying to convince the other, rather just letting people hear the vibration of our voice, letting people hear just our own opinion, and not trying to convince them. And that will be sufficient if we do that. Doesn't mean that the times ahead of us will probably be very difficult times for us, for the people who do not go along with the system, but also for the people who do go along with the system. That's the point. It's not because you go along with the system that there will be no problems. There will be problems for everyone. They will be of a different nature, but it will be a difficult time for everyone. So we have to make the right choice, I think. We have to stay true to our principles and continue to speak out. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for your time. And people on Twitter have expressed that they want to thank you as well. So there's a lot of Irish people who are very grateful to you for all you've sacrificed and all you're doing, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for listening to me, for interviewing me, and also thanks to the people on Twitter who continue to express the support. That means a lot to me.